Welcome to the Capital News, everybody. This is Alex Karitis. Happy to be with you. A few topics that we are going to be discussing on today's podcast relates to a continuation of President Trump's State of the Union address. I recently talked about how he brought up maternity leave as a potential new government program. The other topic that he mentioned during that address had to do with pre-existing conditions and potentially, at least it seemed to me, making that a mandate moving forward as he and Congress address the Affordable Care Act or lack thereof and what may be coming during either this Congress or maybe following 2020. So we'll get into that and we'll have an in-depth discussion. But first, there was some news out today in regards to the border wall and the government remaining open. We still have not seen the text of this bill, at least not at the time of this recording. And at least from a rhetoric standpoint, we still don't know for certain if President Trump is going to sign this legislation. What we do know is it appears that he is going to be reluctant to do so. But if somebody were a betting man, you'd probably bet that the president will sign this. He'll somehow spin it as a win in his column. We have a divided Congress. This is the best we can do. We're going to get $1.4 billion. Some of the wall is already under construction. Remember, he had changed the slogan from build the wall to finish the wall. There is, in fact, progress taking place on the southern border, whether that's new wall or barrier being built or reinforced in areas where the wall or a barrier already does exist. Now, some of the key words that are coming out of Washington, D.C. are quote-unquote poison pills. Poison pills that, in the 11th hour, Democrats might add a few extra things into this legislation that the president cannot agree to. Now, what those things are obviously remain to be seen if they even take place, because this is speculation that there's going to be poison pills in this bill. You got to love Washington, D.C., how everybody gets hyped up on all of these key words, poison pills, and it's always something. And if you flip through all the stations, if you flip through Fox News, MSNBC, CNN, and you have to watch all of them. Don't just listen to one, because it becomes an echo chamber. You only hear what you want to hear. Get out there and listen to a whole host of things. And don't just listen to the clips that Fox News may play of MSNBC and the clips of Fox News that might be played on MSNBC. Because they're showing you what they want to show you. Do they give you the full context? Well, there's no way of knowing that unless you actually flip the station and watch a little bit of all the news networks. Same thing when you're online, or even if you subscribe to an actual physical newspaper, you should have more than one. You should check a few different sites so you can get the full picture. Is it just strict, hard news? Is it real journalism, or is there a lot of opinion and bias from that organization? So in this era of quote-unquote fake news, you really have to do your own due diligence, and I know that makes it tough. That's what, in part, what this podcast is very much about. I go digging around all these different sources. What are the liberals saying? What are the conservatives saying? What does the Washington Post say? What's the Washington Times saying? CNN, NPR. I try to take a look at as much news as possible and then try to tie it all together. And of course, give it to you straight and then give my opinion. I'm not here to claim to be a journalist. This is more about analysis, insight, some prediction, and commentary. So it remains to be seen, will President Trump sign this legislation? We have a deadline on Friday, February the 15th. Will there be an 11th hour turnaround? Will he change his mind? Will some of these poison pills be thrown in there? Throw a monkey wrench into the whole thing? Wouldn't be surprised the way things operate But I hope that's not the case. Now he's going to, I'm sure, continue to get slammed by the likes of Ann Coulter and some on the far right. That'll say his presidency's done. 2020 is a foregone conclusion. He can't win. His base will leave him. I told you before, I don't agree with that assessment. I think Build the Wall was a nice campaign rally. I think it gets a lot of people going. I think it's emotional. But I don't think it's the meat and potatoes of the man's presidency, potential legacy, and what happens in 2020. I just think 2020 is an eternity away in this political life that we live. And as I told you before, I think there's going to be a lot of fireworks between here and then. So stay tuned on that, and I will keep you informed. Now, another bit of political news, which I just find to be amusing, and I will do a separate discussion on this, and I will go into greater detail on the Green New Deal. I'm sure you've heard of it. Has a nice sound to it, doesn't it? The Green New Deal. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, evidently thinks that she's FDR. Well, Madam Congresswoman, FDR's New Deal wasn't really good either. We're still paying for it, by the way. I know I rail against the national debt on here all the time and will continue to do so until I'm blue in the face, and I'll do so gladly. And I know I've been saying it's been $22 trillion. I've exaggerated very slightly. It was 21.9999 for a little bit, but we've officially crossed that threshold, and now I can say it is $22 trillion and counting as we sit here. So we're still paying for that New Deal. We're still paying for President Lyndon Johnson's Great Society. And how the hell are we going to pay for this new Green Deal? Well, we're just going to print money. We're just going to print it. It's my understanding that AOC has a degree in economics, from where I have no idea. No idea. But she should go get her money back. I'm going to have to look that up, because write her a letter. Say, hey, Congresswoman, you're going to have to go get your money back. You have no idea what the hell you're talking about. I talk about that all the time, whether that be on the Political Geopolitical podcast or when I get into economic news. Printing money is not wealth generation. You don't create wealth from a printing press. If you did, Zimbabwe would be the wealthiest country in the world. Argentina would be doing fantastically. Japan would be bigger than the United States. That's not how it works. What they don't understand, how they don't understand it, is beyond me. It's anybody's guess. They don't care. They don't care to take the time to educate themselves. They just don't know any better. They're brainwashed. Pick your poison. And it does matter, because it's going to affect you. It's going to affect your children. It's going to affect your great-grandchildren at these rates. $22 trillion. Think about that. We bring in $3 trillion a year, spend $4 trillion. And supposedly this economy is the best it's ever been. That's a lot of bull, but that's what we're told. We were also told from President Trump, when he was candidate Trump, that all of the economy was a bubble. It was a facade. It was propped up by the Federal Reserve. All of these government economic numbers were rigged. It was fixed. Obama was rigging everything. Now President Trump, candidate Trump became President Trump, and now everything's fantastic. All of those numbers that he said were fake, phony, as real as could be, as serious as a heart attack. I'm not buying it. You shouldn't either. Because you don't have a strong economy in near $1 trillion deficits. What's going to happen, not if, but when we enter the next recession? How much bigger are those deficits going to get? Because typically that's what will happen. Because the government wants to come to the rescue. Don't worry. I'm with the government. I'm here to help. Very scary words. But in regards to the Green Deal, Senator Mitch McConnell, Senate Majority Leader, wants to bring this to the floor of the Senate for a vote to get the Democrats on the record. Isn't this fascinating? Isn't this a lot of fun? I mean, the man said this with a smile on his face. He wants to get the Democrats, and most assuredly, the senators who are already running for president and those who may enter the ring, on the record if they're going to vote for such a monstrosity that we can't afford. Nor does it make any economic sense. I'm all for green technology. I'm all for becoming more efficient. That's what the marketplace is all about. That's what we're in the process of doing. But to stop everything, end air travel, build a train all around the world, I mean, these people are concerned about the planet, but I don't think they know how big the planet really is. It's big. I mean, you're not just going to build a train system overnight that connects you to all points in the world. And this is the Democrats. These are the captains of regulation and red tape. I mean, are they going to cut the red tape to go green? I just don't get where they're going, what they're going to do. But they're the masters of hypocrisy, so whatever it takes to get whatever they're after, they will gladly do. But I thought that was a rather political savvy move from Mitch McConnell to bring this to a vote, and I think that'll happen probably this week. Tying them down, it'll just be more ammunition for the president and Republicans to rail against the Democrats. I mean, but you got to give AOC some credit from the standpoint of her honesty and coming out and saying that this is what we want and this is how it should be. It's fascinating. Now to the real discussion of today. I want to mention those pre-existing conditions in regards, obviously, to health insurance. And it appears to me from the rhetoric from the president that he wants to ensure that pre-existing conditions cannot be used by a health insurer to deny somebody access to health insurance or any coverage thereof. Now, I understand that this is highly emotional. There's nothing, I mean, at the end of the day, what do we have? We have our health and we have our time, and that's really it. And then we hope and pray for a lot of other blessings. But at the end of the day, it really is just our health and our time. So, to set the record straight from the outset, I understand the emotional argument here. I don't want people to be sick. I don't want them to suffer from cancer or any disease, be in accidents and injured for a short period of time or for the rest of their lives. But this goes back to the question what the role of government ought to be. Because we have a market, it's called health insurance. We have institutions that are called charities. We have institutions that are called religious organizations. They're churches, they're mosques, they're synagogues, etc., etc. There's communities, there's family, there's friends, there's corporations. There's a whole area out there where private money can solve these issues. Yet for some reason we think that government is all-knowing and can solve these problems, when all of the evidence points to the contrary. You don't have $22 trillion in debt because the government knows what it's doing. I mean, one of the things that you're supposed to look at if you're an investor, especially in stocks, you're supposed to look at the financial statement. You're supposed to look at the income statement. Is this company growing organically? Is there, some top-line revenue growth here? Are they managing their costs well? What are their gross profit margins? What's going on? And then you sort of look at the balance sheet. How much debt do they have? Is it reasonable? Is it something that they can pay off with the revenues that they're generating? They have enough cash flow. You look at the statement of cash flows. Because if there's no cash, there's no business. So you have to look at all of these things to make those decisions. The same thing holds true in government. You don't just get to pile all of your bad deeds and all of this crap on government and say, well, it's fine. Debts don't matter. I mean, if debts don't matter, then why stop at 22 trillion? Why don't we just print money like we have been that's caused so much malinvestment and dislocation of prices that we don't know up from down, that will come to a day of reckoning very soon? Why don't we just print it until we have 50 trillion in debt, call it a day? AOC can afford her Green New Deal. Everybody can have health insurance. And everybody can go to college for free. Now, to those out there who might be liberal-minded, you probably think, yeah, that's fine. It's not. It's not fine. In the same issue that I spoke about recently with maternity leave, this is the same thing for pre-existing conditions. Health insurance companies get in business to manage risk. That's what insurance is all about. And they get in business to make a profit. And profit is not a four-letter dirty word. It's what drives and grows and sustains an economy. If you're not making a profit, you're probably going to go out of business unless somebody's going to continually loan you money. But then, again, you're going to be in that downward spiral of always chasing your tail. So I don't like it when the government intervenes in business to say, here's how you must operate, because then it's not your business. If somebody's telling you what to do, it's not your business. It's your business when you run it and manage it the way you want. If somebody says that you're a free citizen, but they tell you what time to wake up, what time to go to bed, what you're going to do all day, you think you're free? You're not. And the same holds true here. If the government is going to get involved and say, health insurance companies, you must take on everybody, regardless of their risk, regardless of how it's going to affect your business, you have to take them on. Well, this creates a moral hazard, doesn't it? Because if you can't be denied, then why the hell would you pay for premiums in times when you're healthy? Because once you're in an accident or once you get sick, you can't be denied. So why spend all that money on premiums for insurance that you may never use when you can just wait until something happens, you need it, and say, knock, knock, Mr. Insurance Man, I need a policy. He said, well, I can't deny you. And then he writes one up for you. That's not good business. It's not good government. You show me a dictionary. You show me a thesaurus where government is synonymous with charity, where charity is synonymous with government. They're two separate things. People want to overlap them. This doesn't mean that people who advocate for bigger government don't have good hearts or aren't well-intentioned. And it doesn't mean people like me who are against big government don't have big hearts or aren't empathetic or sympathetic to these needs. Believe me, I'm highly empathetic. I may be too empathetic to a lot of things. And see both sides of the argument very well. But I know what the rule of government ought to be, because we have this thing called the Constitution. We have these things called our founding documents that tell us what the rule of government ought to be. And we have enough human history to know that embarking on this other policy of socialism does not work. So even if you were to buy in, well, I think it's a good idea, well, it's been tried, and it doesn't work. So why do you want to keep doing it? Why do you think you're different? It's the system. It is the nature of things. So then you have to ask yourself, what's the nature of government? The nature of government is force. It's control. Its very essence is control and force. It must be. That's the whole purpose. You break the law, there has to be an enforcement mechanism behind it that deters you from breaking the law. You speed on the highway, you're going to get a ticket. You shoplift, you're going to jail. Makes sense, doesn't it? That was the whole thing with the Affordable Care Act. Well, people aren't going to buy something unless there is a enforcement mechanism behind it. A fine, a tax. Sure, you don't have to buy it, but if you don't, we're going to tax you. Of course, that's completely unconstitutional, but it passed. And it passed the Supreme Court, but I say here today, I think it's going to be reversed. I really believe that. And here's the other thing that we have to take into consideration when we're talking about rights, because everybody always says healthcare is a right. And this is going to be huge in this presidential election, where everybody's saying healthcare is a right. And not only is it a right, it's a fundamental right. It's a fundamental right, as if that makes it more important. First off, it isn't a right. Okay? Health insurance is a good. The medical care that you receive from your doctors, your nurses, specialists, therapists, that's labor. That's a service. You don't have the right to somebody else's labor or service. You know what that's called when you have the quote-unquote right to somebody's labor? It's called slavery. I thought we were supposed to be anti-slavery, and we are. Don't they understand what they're doing here? Don't you understand when you say it's a right? That you can't be denied? That you must be treated no matter what the circumstance? You do not have the right to somebody else's labor or service. You don't. Now, of course, if you go into an emergency room and an ambulance brings you in, of course the doctors are going to do their job, keep you alive, and do what they can. That's not the argument here. The argument is understanding what a right is. Because not only do they say it's a right, they go another step forward and say it has to be paid for by the government, which is additional nonsense. Because we have other rights. Is the government paying you for all those other rights that you have that are protected by the Constitution? We have First Amendment rights to freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of religion, freedom to protest. What happens if you want to go out on the street and protest the government? Do you go to a government office and say, hey, I want to make a really big sign. It's my right. Give me $500 because I want to make this fantastic sign to protest you. That doesn't work that way. And nobody's going to deny for a second that you have the right to free speech. I have a podcast. I have a microphone. I have a headset. I have a computer. I have software. I didn't go to a government office and say, hey, I want to start a podcast because I have the freedom of speech and expression. Give me money to pay for all this stuff. Didn't even cross my mind because I'm not a lunatic. I'm not a lunatic, but apparently a lot of people in our government and in our country are, because they don't understand what it means to have a right. I have the right to bear arms. Do I get to go to a government agency and say, hey, give me $1,000. I got a nice handgun down the store I'd like. Doesn't work that way. And I'm going to need some bullets too. So make it 1,050. It just doesn't work that way. Don't tell people what to do with their business. If you don't like their business, I have a really big idea for you. You ready? Don't go to that business. Don't use their goods. Don't use their services. Nobody is forcing you, and that's the beauty of free market capitalism in a country that claims to be free and home of the brave. You get to go to what store you want to go to. You get to buy what you want to buy. And if you don't want to buy something, you don't have to. It's such a beautiful idea because it's so simple. And unlike socialism, what has history told us about free market capitalism? It works. It works. Every time. Because free market capitalism is all about the consumer. Market participants, entrepreneurs, businesses, corporations, they can only come into existence and sustain their existence if they give the consumer what they want. When the government gets involved, it's higher costs, it's less competition, fewer choices, lower quality, every time. When it's free market capitalism, you have costs come down, you have competition increase, you have more choices, you have better choices, higher quality, every time, because that's how it works. I have to plug my book again here, The Cynic's Guide to Investing, because we talk about this at length. In part 2 of our book, when we look at trends and demographics, we do a lot of analysis in the healthcare space. And when you look at when the government gets involved when government gets involved in healthcare, the costs skyrocket. And there's no end in sight. You look at it before, and it's like, well, oh my goodness, everybody could manage this, which was the case. It wasn't bankrupting people. But now the government's there to save everybody, and everybody's going bankrupt. Everybody's going hyperbolic. And the government just wants to continue to get involved. Now we have Medicare for all. That's going to be a huge slogan. Obviously, AOC is not running for president, but she supports it. And she seems to be the face of the Democratic Party right now. She's gotten more than her 15 minutes. Senator Kamala Harris is for it. I'm sure Senator Warren Pocahontas is for it. We don't have the money. And it's not a good idea. We shouldn't stand for a government that wants to get involved in the business of corporations, because that's called socialism or corporatism. And we shouldn't want to be involved with a government that wants to get into our personal lives and dictate from on high what we do, when we do it, how we do it. Because then we're not free anymore. And then what's the point? I don't want to pay for this stuff. If you want to pay for it, reach into your pocket and pay for it. That's the other thing. You do with your money what you want to do. Do not tell me what to do with mine. All right, everybody, this conversation will most definitely continue. If you're watching or listening on YouTube, please share, like, subscribe. And if you're on thecapitalnews.com, and that's capital with a K, please do the same. Share, like, subscribe, get the word out. I would love to hear from you, so please do add your comments, questions, and if there's topics you'd like for me to cover, please put those there. We are not going to be short of ideas on this program, I can guarantee you that. But let's make this a lot more interactive, and I would love to hear from you. This is the Capital News. I'm Alex Koritis, and Godspeed.